I don't think that we can really set a good example for a university campus if we allow ourselves to be emotionally and ideologically invested in, say, feminism or social justice mindsets that presume malice on the part of men and boys.
I'm Janice Fiamengo of the University of Ottawa. My theme today is the corruption of higher education by social justice ideology, with a focus on the case of Sage Gerard, an undergraduate honors student at Kennesaw State University in Kennesaw, Georgia, who endured a campaign of vilification by faculty members because he dared to reject feminist dogma.
There is such a thing as a humanitarian non-feminist, and these people are very much afraid of feminists and the feminist perspective because of the documented attacks against them, and holding feminism as an establishment to scrutiny based on this is not in any way meant to be a personal attack. It's meant to be a criticism of the system and a desire for a change.
Those of you who follow social justice politics on North American campuses know about the problem of academic conformity. Though the ostensible mandate of university professors is to educate students in an environment free of overt bias, and American Title IX legislation is supposed to guarantee that they do, they have strayed so far from that purpose that they believe they have the right, even the duty, to transform the college campus into a vast mind control factory in which, on a variety of important subjects, including male-female relations, past and present, there is to be only one officially approved perspective from which dissent is strongly discouraged. If students insist on thinking for themselves, in Sage's case, if a student criticizes or, heaven forbid, energetically satirizes the feminist script that men are privileged oppressors and women powerless victims, the ideologues will not hesitate to censor and sabotage the dissident student and will even attempt his personal destruction.
Here on KSU, we have what's called the Interdisciplinary Studies Department, which is where the Gender and Women Studies program calls home. And it is in this department and in this program that we see the same kind of ideological motivation that is quite willing to resort to questionable ethics as a means to engage in, I guess you could say, harmful behaviors that affect male students that don't happen to agree with feminism or any other ideology that is gynocentric or misocentric in nature in, I guess, a social justice mindset.
The whole story of what Sage endured in 2014 is too multi-layered with too many actors and side issues to be told in full here, but we will focus on the main features of Sage's months-long persecution by powerful individuals at Kennesaw State. In addition to showing how one innocent student was harassed and slandered by professors hiding behind their right-thinking credentials and their tenured taxpayer-supported sinecures, we present this as a case study in the feminist modus operandi to silence dissent on campus. It's a three-pronged attack that usually involves either successively or simultaneously the following strategies. 1. Working behind the scenes through insinuation and misrepresentation to undermine legitimate student activities that threaten feminist hegemony. 2. Working through proxy agents, particularly impressionable students, to create a climate of fear and hostility. And 3. Upon loss of anonymity when challenged about misrepresentation, fabricating claims of personal danger, often manufacturing threats, spreading lies about the potential violence of those they have attacked, and often going so far as to lodge charges with the police in order to damage the reputations of their much younger and less powerful opponents. In 2013, Sage Gerard formed KSU Men, a student club, and began to plan a conference slated for November of 2014 called Male Students in Peril.
The conference is called Male Students in Peril, and we are discussing educational equity issues affecting men and boys.
Men need role models earlier than high school. It's so much harder for men to find help. It's so much harder for men to get into homeless shelters. It's harder for them to get on like food stamps and social assistance. Men hardly ever talk about their sexual assault.
When people were to notice a lack of programs for men, they still might not be offended by it. When you question that system, when you say, hey, I think men deserve a little better than what they have right now, there's not much action. And when we discovered that they had aggregate services for women and none for men, that was brought up as a possible Title IX issue.
When his plans for the conference became known, leading faculty in the Interdisciplinary Studies Department went into action, attempting to have the club disbanded by pressuring fellow faculty members to sever relations with the club. It's a KSU rule that any student club must be partnered with at least one faculty sponsor. So the pressure on fellow faculty members was specifically designed to make it impossible for KSU men to maintain club status and thus to hold events on campus. In March of 2014, a faculty member in the Interdisciplinary Studies Department, Professor Thomas Pinn, who was chair of the Peace Studies program, wrote an email to an English professor named Lisa Davis, who was then acting as the club's sponsor, claiming falsely that KSU Men, which he called in his email a voice for men, was a registered hate group. Although Sage's club was not affiliated with A Voice for Men, Sage was close to Paul Elam at that time, and Sage had become A Voice for Men's collegiate activism director on November 10th, 2013. When Sage clarified that his group was not an official part of A Voice for Men and that anyway A Voice for Men was not a registered hate group, Professor Davis quit anyway, just to be on the safe side, I guess. Similar pressure was later brought to bear on two other faculty members associated with KSU Men, Dr. Ken Hoganson of Computer Science, who also quit, and Dr. Jose Garrido, also a professor of computer science. An email obtained by Sage and later published by A Voice for Men reveals a concerted effort the following summer by Dr. Stacy Keltner, the coordinator of the Gender and Women's Studies program, to stir up opposition to Sage's club across campus. As if proof were needed that at least some of these gender studies profs have way too much time on their hands and a drastically perverted sense of priorities, meetings were held in August of 2014 and group emails were sent out tracking the faculty advisor status of KSU Men and attempting to galvanize university-wide concern over what Keltner claims, quote, is not just a GWST program issue or a women's center problem. Stacy Keltner clearly believed that a club on campus advocating for the educational rights of boys and men and attacking the sacred doctrines of feminism was a heresy that she had a goddess-given right to defeat. Any faculty member receiving the emails would have understood the clear warning. Unless you want to be tainted as a hater of feminism and thus as a threat to women, stay away from Sage's club. Now, when Sage learned that Stacy Keltner, a woman he had never met, was pressuring faculty members to boycott his club, he went to speak to her. Naive rationalist that he was, he seems to have thought that talking to a professor might be an acceptable way to iron out misunderstandings, or at least to argue based on facts about his right to form a club on campus. This moment in the larger story, August 26, 2014, seems worth pausing over because it has been commented upon by at least one blogger as evidence that Stacy Keltner had reason to fear Sage Gerard, who dared to come to her office in broad daylight while other people were around to talk to her. Well, that's what academics are supposed to do with their doctoral credentials in their high-salaried, secure positions. Talk to students. It's not like Sage came to her home to confront her. It's not like he came with an angry mob. If she had wanted to put off the meeting to another day, she could certainly have done that by explaining she didn't have time to discuss with him right then. If she had felt worried about Sage's potential anger, she could have asked to have another faculty member present. The fact is that Stacy Keltner's behavior was absurd. Alerted by the chair of the Interdisciplinary Studies Department, Robbie Lieberman, that Sage was looking for her, Keltner left a meeting and zipped into her office where she refused to see Sage. Sage, realizing that he was not going to be able to speak to the professor who was attempting to sabotage his club, left her office and then wrote in chalk on the sidewalk outside of the Social Sciences building an advertisement for the Male Students in Peril Conference, something he's allowed to do by KSU rules. He took some pictures of the chalk advertisement and went on his way. No threats, no shouting, nothing untoward, just a puzzled and determined student wanting to speak to a professor about why this conference, which mattered a great deal to him, was under attack. And Professor Stacy Keltner, hiding in her office, unable or unwilling to defend her opposition, but still committed to destroying the club, got an idea about how she might do it. It was an idea that seems to spring up naturally in the fevered minds of many feminists on university campuses these days. Keltner decided to play victim big time by calling the campus police. In the report that she filed with the police on August 27th, Stacy Keltner, who had never spoken with Sage but who had been carrying on a campaign for some time to have his club disbanded and his conference canceled, made scurrilous allegations, claiming that she, quote, feared for her safety and the safety of her family and colleagues, end quote. Supposedly based on Sage's, quote, violent fantasies about hurting and murdering women, end quote. Given that she did not know Sage and had never spoken to him, how could she know he had, quote, violent fantasies about hurting and murdering women? Well, according to her, based on his cartoons and online blogs and videos, all of which have now been carefully scrutinized by numerous defenders and detractors of Sage, and none of which can, by even a remote stretch of the imagination, be said to offer evidence of murderous intentions. The worst that one commentator on a pathetic and badly written site called Man Cheese could find was a witty video that Sage made in which he used the C word in response to an annoying feminist advocate. The C word is not quite enough for a police report, I wouldn't think, and the police didn't think so either, given that the police officer chose not to pursue Keltner's complaint. In a remarkable example of psychological projection, Keltner also claimed in her police report that Sage desired to, quote, challenge/silence all women and gender programs and educational activities on campus, which was why she, as coordinator of the program, was likely a, quote, prime target, as she claimed. In fact, of course, the opposite is true. It was Keltner who wanted to silence all educational activities on campus that advocated from a non-feminist perspective for the rights of boys and men.
I don't think feminism is the source of men's problems. I think that our gender dichotomy and the culture that we have been raised in is the source of these problems.
KSU Men is an anti-feminist organization, and their purpose is to address men's issues, but what they end up doing is just bashing feminism. We wanted to host a panel to talk about healthy masculinity, and we were actually going to invite the president of KSU Men, Sage, to speak on that panel about masculinity. we were going to try to talk to him ahead of time and be like, can we leave feminism out of that discussion, because that's just going to end up distracting from the topic that we want to talk about.
A lot of people feel like Yes Body is trying to silence KSU men.
Well, I'm a member of both groups. I'm a member of KSU Men and I'm a member of KSU Yes Body. KSU Yes Body wants to be like the one group to encompass all of gender egalitarian discussion here on campus.
Even if Sage had wanted to challenge or silence women's studies programs on campus, he had no power to do so, and nothing in his behavior showed him attempting to do so. Never mind. This is classic feminism. Professor Keltner and her friends had hit on the prime strategy that they would use in their attacks on Sage. Repeat over and over again that he was a threat to women. Despite the fact that the police did not see fit to pursue Keltner's charge against Sage, the charge helped her in at least two ways. One, it meant that Sage was prohibited from confronting Keltner about her actions to destroy his club, thus allowing her to continue her opposition unimpeded. And two, it provided a very juicy tidbit for the rumor mill on campus, and an effective basis on which to build character assassination. The useful thing about claims of female fear of men is that the basis for the claims never has to be proved. The claims just have to be asserted, and they take on a life of their own, very damaging personally to the man about whom the charge is made, and not at all damaging to those making the claim.
I have an issue with portraying feminists as terrorists.
Ultimately, the dean of students, after a complaint by Jose Garrido, had to send out a general email to members of the Gender and Women's Studies program, advising them to stop their pressure tactics. Not surprisingly, though, his message did not result in the faculty ceasing their attacks on Sage and his conference. They simply began using other tactics.
I have an issue with portraying feminists as terrorists.
Soon there were a whole series of allegations about Sage, aimed to portray him as a dangerous man. On September 4th, 2014, Sage received an email from the KSU Division of Legal Affairs informing him that 2 anonymous campus hotline complaints had been made against him, stating that he had created a, quote, hostile work environment for multiple KSU employees who not only fear intimidation and harassment, but actual physical violence against themselves and their families, end quote. And that KSU students had also expressed, quote, real fear, end quote, for their physical safety on campus. The only basis for the complaint was an action Sage had performed a full year and a half previously, when he had entered a woman's washroom in the middle of the night to put up stickers saying, men's rights are human rights. Yeah, a year and a half earlier.
I have an issue with portraying feminists as terrorists.
Stickers in the women's washroom. No matter, Sage was once again under investigation. The day before this, on September 3rd, 2014, Sage had sent an email to Professor Thomas Pinn of the Interdisciplinary Studies Department asking to know why, months earlier, Professor Pinn had claimed falsely that KSU Men was a registered hate group. Sage had asked to meet with Professor Pinn. But instead of owning up to his mistake, which he could easily have done, Professor Pinn immediately called the police to report that he had received a, quote, possible threatening email from Sage. According to the police report, the campus officer who responded to the call read the email and, quote, observed no threatening message, end quote. Part of Professor Pinn's problem may have been that he was a man rather than a woman, and that therefore his feelings of fear didn't generate the same level of automatic deference that it might have if he had been female. Nonetheless, the case was being made. Professors were calling the police on Sage. Sage, therefore, was a harasser, creating a climate of fear.
I have an issue with portraying feminists as terrorists.
A few days later, a feminist campus group called Yes Body, partnered with Professor Stacy Keltner, was formed on campus almost entirely, it seems, to stir up student opposition to Sage's Male Students in Peril conference. The first announced action of Yes Body was a protest against Male Students in Peril, which amounted to a 5-day display of underwear and a mattress obviously inspired by Emma Sulkovitz, famous Columbia U mattress girl who made up a story about being raped to gain attention. The point was clearly to link campus rape with Sage's efforts to promote educational equity for boys and men, as if campus rape was the result of men's rights activism.
I have an issue with portraying feminists as terrorists.
There's an exhibit here, and there was no real concrete, there was no link to where the sources were, no actual numbers, statistics, and it was just very convoluted.
This is a response to a conference that's going on Saturday, and we just wanted the student body to know rape statistics and wanted them to be able to see actual statements from victims that go to KSU before they heard about rape hysteria.
Well, they've been taking quotes from Paul Elam and Sage, use them out of context, pretty much trying to say that we're a hate group. A couple of their displays talk about the conference coming up, but none of them really seem to understand what our group is about.
I have an issue with portraying feminists as terrorists.
The students, with anonymous faculty support, also created Men Formation, a Tumblr blog devoted to attacking the men's rights movement and Sage personally. Then, acting in concert with Yes Body, the president of the Atheist Union, Andrew Klein, challenged Sage to debate feminism 1 week before Sage's conference, and used the debate as an occasion to smear Sage's reputation even further by claiming that women at KSU were so afraid of him that they required police escort, a clear reference to the Keltner incident.
Are you aware that there are women on this campus who will not leave their car and go to class without protection because they are intimidated by you?
I am aware of that feeling. I'm aware that they do that. So yes. However, that is not my responsibility. The way that advocacy is interpreted is not something that I can be held responsible for. And if there are women on campus who feel intimidated by ideas, that speaks to the level of cultural insecurity that can be found on campus. And that can speak to the level of cultural insecurity that is used to try to reframe the issue and to dodge the verifiable evidence that there is a very evil presence in the way we look at men and women today. So the answer is yes.
Thank you for your candor. Sage, my next question is going to be this. Is there any chance that you would apologize to the women that you've intimidated and swear that you won't do this sort of thing anymore?
I'm going to have to challenge the question. It's a loaded question. It's in essence saying that I intended to intimidate, when that is not true. Rather, anything that I have done, even especially recording, is done for fear of my own safety, for fear of what might happen to me, since other people in my position have been intimidated and harassed just for talking about issues affecting men and boys. So the question is loaded. And, in addition, I would not and never will apologize for caring about gender equity on campus or on this planet.
It was obvious that it really wasn't a fair debate, and that made me more curious about what is the deal with the organization.
From Sage's side, I've seen nothing but like actual facts.
All of this and much more was the build-up to the Male Students in Peril Conference, the results of which are available on YouTube for anyone to view. It was a serious and productive one-day conference, and despite the presence of a rump of sour-faced, eye-rolling feminist students, who of course dared not challenge anyone directly but kept their fingers busy tweeting, it went ahead without difficulty. When I attended the conference, I knew nothing of what had gone on in the previous months, and my impression of Sage was simply of a personable young man, highly intelligent in his arguments and eloquent beyond his years. When the full story of what had been done to him and what continued to be done with complaints rolling in right up until the day he graduated a year later, when that story became apparent, I was shocked. Not so much that students would attempt to capitalize on the conference to claim their virtuous victimhood, but that so many professors would have behaved unprofessionally, and that the KSU administration allowed a male student to be so targeted. For what? For criticizing feminism and for trying to put on a great conference.
Part of the reason why I became interested in KSU Men here is because I had been receiving emails about a rape aggression defense class. The problem that I saw with the rape aggression defense classes was that the opposing, what they teach the men is that they don't teach them really defense, but how not to offend.
Rad for Men is a contribution toward Rad System's destiny-driven programming for women, and men are given messages that are consistent with telling them that they are responsible for violence against women, and a course on self-defense.
They teach men to just defend women, but not themselves usually.
I really like this group. These people are very nice. They have very good goals in mind. I haven't made my opinion about the larger group, the men's rights movement group.
We've had members come in who say something along these lines. I love KSU Men. I love what you guys are doing. I go, good job. This is great. I'm terrified what will happen to me if people knew I was with you. And it's a valid fear because we are in a culture that does not like the concept of men's rights. It does not like the concept of a non-feminist perspective.
If you hear people talking bad about us, come find out for yourself.
Feminists often claim that it isn't right to define a movement like feminism based on its most radical elements. So what are we to make of the actions of Stacy Keltner, coordinator of the Gender and Women's Studies program, and her colleague Thomas Pinn, coordinator of the Peace Studies program, who went out of their way to make KSU such a terrible place for one male student that a less hardy person would likely have left the school altogether? Are they radicals, or are they mainstream academics doing what feminist academics regularly do?
I have an issue with portraying feminists as terrorists.
They're mainstream feminist academics, and they're still in their secure positions, collecting their big salaries and teaching their classes. And they're representative of a movement based on a theory of male evil, a movement so warped and vicious, so detrimental to the understanding and moral imaginations of those who adhere to it, that it should have no more place as an accredited subject of academic study than voodoo or yogic flying. Those actually would be far less damaging. Contrary to what Stacy Keltner claimed in her police report, Sage never tried to silence all women and gender programs at KSU. But frankly, I'd love to see such programs disappear from campus as quickly and humanely as possible.